everyone, and welcome to another 12 tags video. It's almost at the end of the month, and as usual I am just getting my tag in by the skin of my teeth. That's if this video manages to upload in time. So I'm just having a quick look at the 2 months that we've done already. So that was my January tag and little 3-inch square, and this is my February, and you will see that March will be completely different to these two tags, and that's the fun of this challenge. Each month you get a different prompt. Don't know why I keep holding that upside down, from Tim Holtz, and each month we get the chance to try out lots of different techniques. So as usual, I'm going to attach a picture of the original tag, which is Tim's inspiration, to the back of mine, and let's see where I end up. And because I already know, because I've made the tag, I will tell you it looks nothing like this one, but I drew my inspiration, my original inspiration, from the techniques and the products that Tim was using, and you'll see where I end up with mine. So this is the pretty March version, where he has a gorgeous butterfly stamp, and then he's used embossing paste to emboss with. I'm going to be using this camera on my tag, so you can see I've already deviated. I don't have the butterfly, and I'm going to use the camera instead. And I've had this little quirky idea to try out, and I hope you enjoy seeing what I am about to do. So I've cut out my 3 by 6 inch tag, and I'm just going to create a margin which is 1 inch along the left hand side and across the bottom. And then I'm going to repeat the process, but this time slightly narrower, at 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch on my little 3-inch square. And for those of you that have not watched these videos before, I've been playing along with Tim Holtz's 12 tags challenge for quite a number of years, and every month we make a tag and try out some new techniques and some new products. And I've decided just to play a little bit differently this year, and I want to create a sampler at the end of the year, which is what the 3-inch square is all about. And you'll see that I come up with a slight dilemma by the end of this tag as to how this brightly coloured tag, as it ends up, is going to fit in with the two that I already have. So more about that later. So something that Tim did was to use washi tape as a kind of resist before he put the paint onto his tag. And I'm going to do a similar thing, except I'm going to be a little bit more precise on one side, and I'm going to be cutting out circles in the washi tape, and you'll see the madness of my plan taking shape in just a moment. I was wondering what I could do in the background of my camera stamp, and I was thinking, you know, of all the different things that we associate with a camera, and suddenly the phrase "just say cheese" came into my head, and it was that drove this tag forward. And you can see here that I'm just creating some circles on the left hand side of my tag, and these shortly will become the holes in my cheese. So I did try to stick 2 pieces of tape together, because the washi tape doesn't really work very well in the hole punch. So some of my little circles I'm cutting freehand, and some of my little circles I'm sort of semi-punching and then trimming them into shape. So whatever I do on my tag, I'm kind of repeating on my little 3-inch square. So now I'm kind of following what Tim did, was just adding some random strips of washi tape to the right hand side of my tag. And everything is the same on the little square, except slightly smaller in scale. So because I'm creating cheese, I was thinking of doing red, yellow and orange on the background of my tag, but I'm going to stick with the mustard seed and wild honey distress paints for my background on this tag. So I'm just adding some to my craft mat, and then I'm dipping my tag and my square into the paint, and then just spraying with some water to make sure that all those paints marble together. So I'm drying off that first layer of paint, and then I'm just adding a little bit more texture by dipping into those remaining little dobs or little spots of paint that are on my craft mat. So you can see a really simple background, just two tones of colour sort of blending into one another, and it was at this point I'm adding just a little touch of yellow to that left hand side, and that's because obviously I want my cheese to look a little bit more yellow than orange, so I'm just running the paint and smudging it over that left hand side of the square and of the tag. So everything's nice and dry, and I'm going to use my Pitt brush markers to add the little holes over the washi tape circles that I laid down earlier. So I'm trying to get them to look like dimensional holes in my cheese, something like Edam, and I'm starting out with the grey, but I do change my mind and decide to go for a complete contrast with the black. It looks okay in the grey, but I think I just wanted to go for drama. If I'm going to go for cheese, I might as well go for drama. So you can see, hopefully, that those little holes do look like they're quite dimensional, and that you could see through the little wedge of cheese that's on the side of my page. That's when I decided to try the black on the little 3-inch square, and I preferred the contrast of the black. So it was nice and easy just to go from the grey by just colouring over the top with the black. I just had to make sure that that marker was dry underneath. So you'll see now and again I'll just dab with the tissue because the ink was still a little bit wet, and it was my second coat of ink was lifting the first coat off. So the ink in a Pitt pen is permanent once it's dry, so I just needed to make sure it was completely dry, and it tends to sit a little bit on top of the washi tape, so it takes a little bit longer to dry than perhaps if I'd have just drawn these little circles straight onto a paper surface. So the next thing that I wanted to do was just to have a little bit of a shadow along the edge of what will become the cheese side of my tag. And you can see here I'm just smudging that pen. This time I'm using the grey just to add a little bit of shadow. And if I get a little bit too much of a dark shadow, you can just take a baby wipe while the paint is still wet and lift a little of that ink, which you can see me doing here. And I'm just masking off the cheese area of my tag and of my little square, and I'm going to add a little bit of black splatter. So I'm using the black soot distress paint, and I've just watered it down ever so slightly onto my brush and slightly off camera, and then you can see there just adding a little bit of water with my brush and tapping some little paint splatter onto my tag background. So whilst that's drying, I'm ready to stamp the camera. I'm using my black archival ink, and I need to stamp my image twice, once for the tag and once for the little square, and then I want to stamp the little lens section a further 4 times. So as well as colouring in the image of the camera that I have stamped, I also want to add a little bit of patterned paper. So I'm stamping again the camera. This time I'm going to cut out only the shaded section of this camera image, and that will become this orange check. So I need to do one whole camera and one part of the camera for the little square. So you can see this is where they're going to sit on the little camera image. So the next thing that I need to do, because this is a blueprint stamp, I want to save all those lovely lines that are sketched into the background. So although I have cut out the image that I'm going to decoupage on, I want to preserve those lines. So I'm now stamping that onto my tag and my square. So just using a post-it note to mask the left-hand side where the cheese is on the little 3-inch square. Now the reason that I mask this and I don't mask it on the original tag is that you won't be able to see much of that cheese if I took that camera right over the whole area. So I'm changing things a little bit because of the size of the 3-inch square. Now the tag itself, I'm going to have as much of the camera as possible going across the centre of the tag. I'm just having a little bit of the camera off the left-hand edge. And just making sure that ink is nice and dry before I start to stick down the elements onto the tag. So you can see I've got all my elements pre-cut, and I need to remove the 3/4 of an inch from the left hand side of the camera image. So I'm making sure that I can see that lens, otherwise it will look a little bit odd, and I'm just trimming away that section. You can see I've got my 2 pieces of lens, I've got the little piece of gingham and the words for my camera ready to attach. And I'm going to be using some Ranger Matte Multi-Medium to stick my pieces down. So not only am I putting the matte medium down initially on the surface of the tag, but then I'm covering the entire image once everything is in position. You'll see that helps me use my Pick pens to colour in the image. So it also has the added advantage of making sure that everything is stuck down nicely. Now, I always like to go over the surface with my finger just to make sure there are no or as few brush marks as possible on the image itself. So the other thing that I want to do is just coat the little decoupage items so that they have the same coating on when I come to colour them in, and I'll be colouring them in separate to the tag and the little square. So again, coating the whole tag with the matte multi-medium, then adding the items into position and going over the entire tag, including a little 1/2-inch circle for the top of the tag, a little reinforcer, and you can see that I'm replacing those words flash, lens and camera. So now I need to make sure that this is all nice and dry before I go anywhere near the surface with my pens. If you don't, you'll ruin the ends of your pens, so be patient and make sure everything is nice and dry. And this really does give a matte surface. I've used some other matte mediums before and really it's not a true matte surface, so I quite like this multi-medium from Ranger, and I use it. I don't tend to use the gloss very often. I like this matte finish. So now it's just a case of colouring in. So I'm adding this yellow, which is very similar to the background on the lens and the flash, and the aperture that you look through. No, what's that called? It's not an aperture, it's a viewfinder. And then using a light grey to colour in the rest of the camera. So this goes on nice and smoothly over that slick surface that I have attained with the matte multi-medium. And now I'm going to use my pens to bring the image to life. So first of all, I'm adding a shadow around the edge of the camera. Now if you get too much ink onto the project while it's still wet, you can remove it with a baby wipe, but I'm literally just going around the edge and then blending the ink before it is dry. I'm also using it to shade the edge of the camera to help give it a little bit more dimension. So just deciding where those shaded areas would be and then smudging them out slightly with my fingertip. And hopefully they start, by using the pens in this way, it starts to look like it was part of the background all the time. And then I'm using a finer black pen to just outline those little words that I've stuck on. And the reason that I cut them out in the cream was I just wanted them to stand out against that background. And I'm just framing them with the black pen. And then I'm using the grey to go around the outside of the tag just to add a little bit of shading. So literally just drawing a line and then smudging it out with my finger. And then repeating it on the 3-inch square. So you can see I've got my little cheesy section at the side of my camera, and I'm ready to add the lens section. I'm thinking I might leave a little part of this lens itself in the cream colour, and you'll see how I do that in a moment. So I'm just colouring the entire surface of the lens, but paying, should I say, particular attention to the piece that will show once I've decoupaged this up. Now I've decided not to use foam pads because it just gave it too much depth. I'm going to add the elements as extra, but I'm going to just do it with glue. So it still does give you a little bit extra definition with that lens section, as if it is popping out from the camera. So now I'm using a slightly darker grey, and I've coloured that very central section in on the lens with the yellow, but I'm leaving that middle circle in the same cream as I've left the words. And then I'm just using the darker pen to add some shadow and dimension to the rest of the viewfinder. The lens, not the viewfinder. So those elements are ready to go in position, and just before they do, I'm taking my Pick pen around the edge just to get rid of any of that cream cardstock. And then it's back to the multi-medium to add those pieces into position. So you can see that that does help to make the lens section pop, and I've got plans to add some glossy accents to help that little illusion even further. Because all of the elements of my tags this year have a stitched border, that will help the little sampler that I'm making have some cohesive elements. I'm going around the edge of my little square and my tag with a turquoise blue thread. So I'm just sticking right to the edge and creating a little border and bringing in my complementary colour. So I've gone for the turquoise because I think that this just needs a little bit extra oomph in the colour department, and this turquoise I think is going to do the trick. And I'm going to use the same turquoise when I have a go at Tim's sort of main technique this month, where he used embossing powder on top of embossing paste really. So that's the stitching element complete, and all I need to do is tie off those ends, and I always add a little bit of glue to the back of the piece to make sure that everything stays in position. So I've created a mask for my camera by stamping on a post-it note and cutting it out, and then I'm going to use that to mask off my camera to make sure that I don't get any of the embossing paste onto my image. So I'll be using a piece of scrap paper to catch my embossing powder. I'm using a 3D gel because that's all I've got in embossing paste at the moment, and I'm using my dot fades stencil, and I'm adding the dots around that camera image and across the bottom of my tag. So it's quite easy to remove at this stage any extra embossing paste that you don't want on your tag before you add the embossing powder. And you can see I've really gone for it with this lovely turquoise. And then make sure, again, as you would normally, that the excess embossing powder is all tapped away before you heat set. That's when my camera ran out, so I'm going to show you that process again. I had to carry on with it because otherwise it would have dried while I was downloading the film onto my Mac ready to edit. So you can see here I didn't like those dots at the top, they're all a little bit chunky, so it's quite easy to remove them if you don't like them. So I've just wiped them off, and I'm going to emboss and dry the area where I had the mistake. So I've got my embossing powder in place, and then I'm using my heat gun in the normal way to heat set that embossing powder. So I'm going to repeat that now that the top section is dry, where I wiped away the embossing paste earlier. So replacing the mask, and then just deciding I want some of the smaller dots in this area, otherwise they look a little bit too chunky and sort of blend into one. And just putting a few little dots across the top, and then maybe a couple more on the right hand side. So don't forget to wipe this medium off your stencil, because if it dries hard in the holes of your stencil loses some of that impact. So I've got a couple that were, again, a little bit thick, and I'm just removing them with the end of a barbecue skewer. So then I'm adding my embossing paste and tapping off the excess, and because of the area that I wiped the paste from, I'm just removing the residue of the embossing powder, sorry. And then once again I'm ready to heat set that area. I really did like how this turned out. It does make a change to the embossing paste and add some nice texture to your project. So thanks to Tim for that one. I'll definitely be trying that again. I've done it with adding things to the wet paste like glitter, but I've never tried embossing powder before, and it works quite nicely, so I will do that again. So I'm intending to frame my tag and my little square with the same turquoise, but I want to add some more elements to decorate my tag first, and I'm going to use some of this film strip ribbon as it's quite appropriate to the little camera stamp that I've already used. So I'm just thinking about how I'm going to put this onto my little 3-inch square. Decided I'm just going to distress the edges, and I'm taking the edge of my scissors along the edge of what will be the frame for my little sampler piece. And it was at this point that I came up with a better plan for how I was going to put the film strip ribbon into place on the bottom of the tag. So I create that first little ripple, and then because it's quite a pain to do, I was just working out how much film strip I need, because my little stapler is quite short, It was at this point I decided to flip the end of the film over, which was quite a nice effect, and then use the staple to hold the end in place. So that worked quite well, quite happy with that, and I decided to undo this little section by just undoing the staples from the back and then redoing the little film strip piece on my 3-inch square to match, because I quite liked the look. So I've created sort of one little ripple to start the piece off, and then I've flipped the end back on itself to create a little loop, and then held that in position with a staple eventually. Be patient. Yes, I think I've done it. So I really like how that's turned out, so I'm going to add a second piece, I think, to my tag. So I just wanted to re-emphasize those sections that I created right at the beginning of the tag, and I also wanted to use a little bit more gingham, so I'm kind of combining the two ideas, and I'm cutting little thin strips from the white and orange section of the gingham check. And I'm going to use those along the pencil lines that I created to divide the little tag and the little square into sections. So it's a little bit tricky to glue them where you have your embossing paste, but just persevere and hold things, keep pressing things into position until that glue dries and it will stay in place. So one section top and bottom, and then I'm going along the edge of the cheese. I've got the little section here. And then repeating on the little square. And these two were my most fiddly. I just had to tuck them slightly underneath the film strip in order to keep them within the boundaries of the 3-inch square. And then for added security, just rubbing a little bit of that Ranger matte multi-medium over the top of the paper strips. So I'm really getting to the finishing touches now. That's always the fun part. Knowing when to stop is usually my trouble. So I'm adding a little star charm to the bottom right hand corner of the 3-inch square and securing that in position with a little black brad. And then I'm going to glue the whole piece when I can unblock my glue to that turquoise frame. And again, because of the stitching, I'm taking a little while to make sure that it really sticks down well. This time I've decided to add the star just where that little piece of film flips back on itself. Again with a little black brad, and again I'm attaching my tag to the turquoise frame. So making sure it's nice and centered, and then trimming off the top section into shape. And as I did with the little square, I'm just roughing the edges a little bit with the edge of my scissors. So I think that little gingham strip and circle are looking a little bit plain, so I'm going to outline them with my black pen, and I'm going to add a little bit of doodling. And again, I think the black doodling and lines help to bring the gingham paper back into the actual tag itself. It just seems to make it belong. So I'm just adding lines to either side of the check and then putting a little dot in the centre of the white sections. And I think if you look at my tag now, you can see that the little gingham reinforcer at the top is really standing out now. And I think it's because on the camera, the actual gingham area does have some stamped detail on it, some black line work, and therefore just adding the doodling to the gingham again just makes it blend in with the whole design of the tag and the little square. And that takes me back to the little phrase that made me think of adding the cheese to the side of my tag in the first place. I know, madness, it's just madness. And so I'm just creating, say cheese, on a little strip of paper to match the words that are already on the tag itself. So outlining them in black, and then I'm adding them to the little film strip. So I'm just curving them slightly and then gluing them into position on the film strip. And whilst I was doing that, I thought I have to add a word to the little piece, the extra piece that I've got on top of my tag now, and I think I'm going to add gorgonzola. Because I don't know about you, when someone says cheese to us, that's exactly what we say. And that makes you laugh, and therefore you get a good photograph. Hope that I've spelt gorgonzola okay. And then adding that onto the bottom film strip. So I think I'm almost there. What else do I need? A little bit of ribbon on my tag and the word March on my little square, and I think I'm done. Noticed a little button on the front of the camera on the tag, so I'm just cutting the legs off my brad and sticking a little orange brad in place of the button. And then I think all that's left for me to do is go and find a piece of ribbon, which I did and forgot to switch the camera on. So I've added a little bit of blue and yellow ribbon to the top of my tag, which I coloured with my distress inks and had them in my little scrap stash of ribbon. And I've added a couple of charms with a little orange topped safety pin, and I think I'm calling that a day. I'm just adding a tiny flourish with my glossy accents once I can actually get into the bottle. And then really I'm just applying it over the orange areas that are on the camera, and they'll be nice and shiny once this is dry. And then I'm adding the word March. Now I start off adding it just below the stitching, and then I had a look at my previous little samplers, and they are coming in from the edge, so you'll see that I have a little look, and then I start to move them just up to the edge of the 3-inch square. And that gives a little point of reference that make those 3 little squares, although they look really different, which you will see in a moment, it means that they have got certain elements that are repeated. So the size and shape of the square, the framing, the stitching, and the fact that I've put the month of March, or the month, in the same lettering on each square. You can see that March turned out very differently indeed. So that's it from me for this month. I really hope that you've enjoyed seeing how I got from Tim's inspiration to my interpretation. Don't forget, if you want to pop along and play along with Tim Holtz's tag challenge, you haven't got very long for this month, but next month is right around the corner, so you will have fun seeing what he's come up with for the month of April. And it's always lovely to see what everybody does each month. There's lots and lots of different views on his tag, or lots of different interpretations of his tag, so it really is worth playing along if you like this kind of art. Stay tuned till the end of the video for the links, and I will say once more, don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button, the like button, the share button. It always encourages me to make more videos, so and you'll be the first to know next time that I post. So until then, thank you for watching. Here are the links. Click on this one if you want to check out everything that I've got on my blog, and there's a fair amount of creativity over there too. Also, you'll find the link directly back to Tim Holtz's challenge if you want to take a look what everybody got up to this month. Alternatively, you can go back in time to February 2013 and check out how I made this tag, and I've given you the link to the tutorial and to the playlist for 2013 as well. Or you could check out what I did in, looking for the date, November 2013, and this is the link for the 2014 playlist as well. And last but not least, you could pop over to my Etsy shop to see the workshops that I sell for larger projects like this one. And if you're into tags, this is the project for you. You could make yourself some tag storage to keep your tags on your desk, so that you've got them there to inspire you every day. And this is another version of the same pattern. So I'm thinking, actually, I really need to make a new little tag storage unit for myself so that I've got room to add all my 2015 tags. And I'm thinking of going a little bit mixed media. So watch this space. I'll show you what I get up to when I have finished. Until then, don't forget to check out all the goodies over on my Etsy shop.